really hot today, but let me get myself ready so we can talk. Oh wow, it is full of people here today, but well, is it a surprise? After all, Brazil has been selling itself as this tropical heaven where gringos can come and, watch half-naked women sambando during carnival. But what if I told you it hasn't always been like this? What if carnaval didn't even start in Brazil? The concept of a celebration of excess, preempting Lent or spring, it's not a new one. And it is no surprise that when the colonizers, the Portuguese, came here, they brought their own version of this party. To them, this event was called intrudo. Unlike the parties that we have today, where it's mostly about music and dancing, well, at the time, those parties were all about pranking, throwing dirt, soot, and sometimes even urine at passersby. Role reversal was also common at this event. Men would dress as women and women as men, but then after those couple of days, everything went back to normal and the status quo was restored. Time softened some of these more aggressive tendencies of intrudo, like instead of throwing dirt or soot at others, we throw confetti. Most of these events were unorganized, they just kind of happened. And it was only in the 19th century where a Portuguese shoemaker living here in Brazil had this really interesting idea. What if we organized a march to the sound of drums and eardrums to celebrate Intrudu, which by that point was already beginning to be called Carnaval. And this is how one of the most traditional ways of celebrating Carnaval here in Brazil started, which is the bloquinhos. By the 1930s, things like ranchos, cordões, private and public balls were ubiquitous, but they were still very much local. They were organized by the local people and they were made to please their tastes. And while these local parties were developing and creating their own identity, something else was also beginning to take shape in Brazil at the time: the rise of a populist government. Getulio Vargas was the face of something called the 30s Revolution, but really it was just a coup d'etat so that industrialists could take power from the coffee oligarchs. Vargas and his cabinet believed that the only way of taking Brazil out of the 1920s economic crisis was to transform its agro-exporter economy into an industrial one. But not only an industrial economy, but an industrial economy led by his government. Estado Novo, as this period of time became known, has a complicated history. At the same time that Vargas was deeply inspired by corporativism and positivism by Júlio de Castilho and Saint-Simon, he was also, how can I say this, authoritarian. The sense of nationalist authoritarianism showed itself in the creation of a censorship department, or the persecution, extradition, and even sometimes a disappearing of some people. Vargas' ultimate goal was to create a strong nation, and to do so, he had to address the fact that Brazil has many cultural inconsistencies with a country the size of a continent. He wanted to implement something he had learned from his trip to Nazi Germany. He wanted to create a sense of a unified identity because he understood that a unified group is one that can be much easier to implement ideals and policies. But how do you do that? How do you find something that manages to unite a diverse group of people that live such different realities? You see where this is going? Carnival at this point, as I said, was everywhere, but it was very localized. Local groups were organizing them, and they were specific to each location. Vargas saw beyond what it was now. He realized that these were a couple of days where the whole of the country was united, celebrating one thing. He didn't saw the party, he saw the symbol.
Antigamente uma valsa de roda era de fato requinte da moda. Já não se dança uma valsa.
Vargas and enforcers started by censoring anything that they didn't deem patriotic enough. By the 1930s, schools of samba became something of a organizers for carnival. However, to do so, they needed permits. But these permits, instead of being about safety, were mostly about control. For instance, in 1934, a school then known as Vai Como Pode or Go As You Can requested for a permit renewal. However, the police chief said, you know what? I don't like your name. I think it's vulgar. What if you change it to Portela, which was the name of the place where their HQ was, and then I give you the permit? When the school organizers tried to protest that, well, they were threatened with not getting a permit. By 1938, the government strongly suggested that any samba enredo, which are the songs that the schools of samba create to accompany their parades, adopted a nationalist purpose. This could mean anything from exalting historical figures, talking about the beautiful landscapes, or even better, saying the government is cool. But most important of all, you should never talk about uncivilized topics. Things like, well, I don't know, the African roots of samba. This suggestion became a rule by 1947.
Por isso não quero lembrar quando partir meu grande amor.
Another way Vargas found to spread this sense of a unified nation was through the use of radio. In collaboration with the Department of Propaganda, national radios all around the country were forced to play something called Samba de Estácio, which was a cleaned up version of real samba. In this version, no one is vagabonding on the street or, going on dates. No, they talk about working hard and being a good citizen. Slowly but surely, Samba de Estácio became the samba of Brazil. And beyond just radio stations, other intellectual sectors were also encouraged to talk about Estados Novos' preferred elements of the party. And with that, slowly but surely, Getulio Vargas molded and shaped Carnival into the symbol that he wanted. Of course, after Vargas passed away in 1954, much has happened in the country. We've had a 21-long dictatorship from 64 to 85. And then we also are in the internet world now, and that changes a lot the way that we interact with our own cultures. But it is undeniable that Vargas's national unification project worked. It was only in the last 20-something years that a lot of carnival organizers started to question, what does this party mean to me? Does it make sense that they keep adopting some of the symbols that Vargas created? Or is their self-expression and culture found somewhere else? The answer to that is complicated, or perhaps it isn't even just one answer like Vargas forced on us. Perhaps there are many answers at the same time, and we can only hope that they all end up in carnival.
Não acabou pra essa hora!